life if it was state domination as their policy. You see, domination of the state became a very powerful political factor after the First World War. And therefore, you can say that though Germany as a nation was defeated, her idealism won in one sense. And is it possible that some sort of imperialism may be renewed now? That is a problem he discussed in chapter 9. And he feels that it has a very little chance of success because the trial itself has become very difficult. And in the light of 40 years that have passed since he wrote this book, the chances have still more receded, we can say. When he wrote this book, it was 40 years back, and even then he said that renewing of imperialistic movement by any nation or a power has become rather difficult now. And ideas doesn't seem to be practicable now, and even as a possibility, it is very remote or distant. The only contingency now we can say, which can arise only if Russia and United States can come together to dominate the world. That's one. Another is if communist China and Russia can come together. You see, then there is a chance of world domination. But this is my reading because it's based on this book, and the situation then didn't arise at that time when he wrote the book 40 years before. You see, and if both these things seem rather improbable, and even if either succeeds, the success seems to be precarious. The two combinations are first of all improbable, Russia and America coming together, or China and Russia coming together, looks very improbable. But even if they succeed, either of them successfully, trying to dominate, the success would be rather precarious. And that comes to the end of the ninth chapter practically, because it's a chapter which deals with the possibility of world empire. And as a question, I am putting it down in a short compass to go forward to chapter 10th, which deals with the possibility of United States of Europe. That is the 10th chapter. The 10th chapter deals with the possibility of United States of Europe. And in that chapter, he works out that 18th and 19th century, the democratic idea was, dominant in the politics of Europe, particularly 18th and 19th century. But even in Europe, democracy as a constitution had not won fully. Democratic idea was there, but it had not won fully, because you can see Central Europe and Russia were not democratic. This is Central Europe and Russia were not democratic. So that gives the situation as it actually obtained, in spite of the winning of the democratic idea became dominant among all politicians and political thinkers. But the idea had already triumphed not only in Europe, but in America and in Asia. All the South American republics and all the Asiatic countries that were rising at that time, Persia, India, Iran, and all these, well, they got the inspiration from that idea. So that the idea had won already in Europe, America, and Asia, the democratic idea. That is one that the 18th and 19th century gave to the world. Democratic idea, which though partially applied in Europe, well, won throughout the four continents of the world. Second thing that it gave was a perfectly organized state. Idea of a perfectly organized state, the need of a perfectly organized state. That was the contribution of Germany, you see. Basically, this is a socialistic idea. If you study and go to the bottom of this, idea of making a perfectly organized state, it means it will come to socialism. If you analyze the inspiring force below, you will find it comes to socialism. It will insist on equality. And socialism or even communism as a form of society, both are very old. It is not that this is now newly found. You see, in India in the 2nd century, in 2600 years before, when Gautam Buddha was living, there were republics that were absolutely communistic. Absolute communism. So was also certain parts of city-states in Greece. And so communism as a as a philosophy of social, form is not new. It is as old as the world. The communists saying that they have made something new is not true. It is only on a large scale now. It applies to nation, it applies to classes all over the nation, and it tend to become international because the class consciousness is sought to be awakened, you see. The effort is to awaken a class consciousness throughout the world, irrespective of national barriers and cultural, differences. Now here, after the first, this idea has now emerged. After the First World War and even after the Second World War, it has almost come to the top in political life. The idea of an organized state, socialistic idea. You can call it democratic socialism if you like, because you don't want to compromise democracy and throw it out. So, but it is democratic socialism. Socialism all the same, and this is one of the chief driving forces of political life today among all the nations of the world. The nation self-governing organizes its social and economic life now and claims to organize it for the good of the collectivity. In actuality, the imperialist idea was dominant till yesterday. Even now, it's not yet gone. Belgium, Portugal, Holland, Italy, Japan till yesterday had their empires. So that in spite of this democratic idea, one, the socialistic movement tending towards the organization of an efficient state. Third force is already there in operation, the imperial idea. Actually now receding, it is not that it is powerful, it's not increasing, but it is there as a practical force. Belgium, Holland, Portugal, big slices of the world, you see, and they are not the only nation. There are others as counting here. Italy, United States has Philippines till yesterday, isn't it? So France has even now, you see. So has Italy in the North Africa. So the imperialistic idea is a receding force, but it is a force. One idea that is thrown to the front is democratic idea and organization of a perfect state. United States of Europe, then he is dealing with that possibility in this chapter 10th. It is a distinct possibility, especially after the Second World War, you see. But the fear is that if it comes really into a political organization of the continent of Europe, it would perhaps try to dominate Asia and Africa. That is one danger. But what actually has taken place is something different. What actually has taken place is a federation not one that can unite the continent as was once dreamt of in times of the Crusades, but a military alliance led by the USA against Soviet Russia, NATO powers, is it not? That is what has actually taken place. And now second thing that is taking place is the organization of European market. There are the two items which you now see, the possibility. This was 40 years back. You must always bring that into your mind when you are dealing with the sight of a seer who has seen the play of forces in international life 40 years before now. And even then he saw the possibility of United States of Europe. And he thought it would not become a political possibility. If it became, it would be a danger for Africa and Asia, which I think is quite true, if it became a political union. But it is only now a military alliance led by the USO with the NATO powers against the threat of Russia. That's one. And second thing, NATO does not include all the powers of Europe either. Even as an alliance, it's an uneasy group, because France is always objecting to United States leadership, isn't it? I think that's an inner story, which very few outside know, but that is the inner difficulty with France, is that she doesn't want to be regarded as a second-class power. See, and she is very jealous of her being always the leader of continental Europe. She would happily like to leave England aside in her isolation of, an insularity, but so far as continent was concerned, she always wants to be the leader. And it is Germany who first broke her, the domination of France by the Prussian War and the Third Napoleonic War, you see, after that. But leadership protesting against her being treated as a second-class power. The economic, political, and commercial unification of Europe which was far off, seems to be drawing near with the signing of the European Market Organization, which even England has joined. So that is the unity which has come. The unity that was projected, United States of Europe, instead of becoming politically an entity, it has become a military alliance against communism and a economic organization in order to protect the increasing industrial, capacity of European powers to be protected against onrush of Russian products and also against United States industries. Remember, the United States is helping the organization of European markets, but it might rebound to the United States industries ultimately, you see, because when all the European states are organized economically and industrially, probably the United States will have to have her plants planted in those countries in order to continue her industries at the peak at which she is working now, you see. She might have to organize in such a way as to put her industries in those countries rather than develop industries here, you see. That would be one consequence that can come about. Well, the main obstacles are the complicated system of administration of a modern state and national group egoism, which have a lot of fear and a sense of past grievances persisting. The European organization doesn't come into active force because of that. Yes. Aurobindo points out in this chapter that the United States of Europe, if it would be achieved, might try to dominate Asia and Europe, and this possibility has now receded very far into the background. Well, yes. Common European market, as I just told you, have come into existence, and any chance of conflict between Asia and Europe, is far off now, and if it came, it would be a very retrograde step. An organization of European states, either economical, industrial, or military, fighting against or pitching itself against Asia, resurgent Asia, newly organizing itself, industry and political life and so on, if it pitted itself against it, it would be a retrograde step because it would be against the coming of human unity. Really speaking, it would not be an advantage or a progressive movement. It would be retrograde. And it's not necessary either. He pleads in that chapter that it's not a necessary, item of progress or growth of international life that Europe should pitch itself against Asia as a continent, because there are plenty of avenues of exchange. First of all, he points out that the character of science and aspects of modern culture are cosmopolitan. Science is cosmopolitan. Science doesn't belong to a country or a continent. Science belongs to the whole world. And so certain aspects of human culture also have now become cosmopolitan all over the world. And therefore, it's not necessary that they should be pitted one against the other in the interests of unity of mankind, which is really the great thing that is coming. The need is to evolve, he says in that chapter, a new supranational or supranational above the nation, you see, a supranational order or supranational organization which would be a free association of international life. The need is not to organize nations on their own basis, but to have a supranational organization. And it is that which would lead to the natural unfolding of the spiritual and ethical powers of the race. It would free the race from too much occupation with the lower necessities of human life, which binds it to the animal consciousness, and it may be the beginning of the development of the higher life. If a supranational organization is brought into existence, then the chances are that with the advance of science which we have, and industrial capacity which mankind has developed, it would be easy to free mankind from the pressing necessity or needs of lower life, with which they are now very busy, and much of the energy is occupied only in meeting the needs of animal life. Well, mankind would be freed from it and would be free to pursue higher aspects of life. That would be the advantage of a supranational organization of international life if it was brought into existence. That is, yes. Now we come to chapter 11, which is a small chapter in which he is trying to work out the small free units and larger concentrated unity. Now there, he is organizing or he is trying to show how the nation unit has evolved. Through what stages the development of nationhood has passed. Nation didn't come into its own all of a sudden at one bound. The organization or the actual realization by human being or humanity of its nation unit is a result of long process of evolution and in which contrary forces have been acting all through. So here he is pointing out the evolution of the nation unit. The nation unit began in various countries in forms of small states. The unit of nation in the beginning was not big nation but a small state, like that those that were in Greece, in India, in Egypt, in China, in Arabia, in Israel. In all these countries, the beginning was small units. They began small, loose cultural, geographical aggregates. They began as aggregates. Small, loose, cultural, and geographical, bound to one place. There were cultural units before, these were cultural units already before they became nation units. The seed of their nationhood rose from, well, their being united in one culture. They had already a common culture before they became a organized political nation unit. Uh, they were city-states, regional kingdoms, or tribal states like Athens, Sparta, or Ganarajya of India, which flourished in the time when Buddha was alive and when the founder of Jainism, Mahavir, was alive. Well, it is that time, about 500 years, there was a period where small principalities and free republics existed side by side. It is strange, but this is historical. You see, now found out by the research in the last 50 years that the small city republics were there, small principalities there, kings were there, and republics which were communistic or socialistic in their constitution were also operating at the same time when Gautam Buddha lived. Such small communities are generally full of vigor, common life, and they are turned easily and early to freedom. Being small, it is easy for them to turn to the idea of freedom. Monarchy or papacy could not flourish in those days. They are too jealous of their freedom to allow only one power or one individual to dominate. Sri Aurobindo says about them, the tendency to a democratic freedom in which every man had a natural part in civic life as well as in cultural institutions of the state, an equal voice in the determination of law and policy, and as much share in the execution as could be assured to him by his right as a citizen and his capacity as an individual. This democratic tendency was inborn in the spirit and inherent in the form of the city states. Why the city states were so vigorous, full of life and vitality? It was because every citizen felt that he has a part to play. Now, when there's such a big organization, big nation unit is there, the individual doesn't feel that he has any direct responsibility in the formulation of either law or policy, or that he's a part of a living whole. Well, whereas in Athens, an election was something because you know everybody, and everybody knew everybody else, and it was as if he has a very definite part to play. Now, having a very large, complex organization, you find it is very difficult for individual to feel that vividness of life of democracy. I mean, the participation in the formulation of the law and so on. But in a small state, it was quite easy, and they were therefore more living. And the contribution they made to human culture is cannot be compared to the contribution of big nation units. You cannot compare. The quality is, it is they who gave whole European culture. In fact, they put the seed. A small state, which is hardly one state of America, one province hardly of India, Greece. Well, it gave culture to the whole of continent of Europe because of that intensity of life, you see, of collective life. One unit of collective life, actively living in which everyone thought that he was part of a whole, a living part of a living whole. You see, that is what gave it that culture which we find parent of European culture today. So in social life, democratic equality is inevitable in small community. In a small community, you cannot maintain rights for a long time. These city-states advanced in culture because of the great creative force due to complete participation, not of a limited class, but of the individual generally in the many-sided life of the community. And the sense which each had of being full of energy of the whole and of a certain freedom to grow, to be himself and to achieve, to think, to create in the undammed flood of universal energy. That's what he writes in that chapter about, the 12th chapter, Evolution of the Nation Unit. Now, modern life, nation unit has become very large in modern condition. Is trying to restore this condition in a clumsy fashion. That each one must feel that he is part of the whole and must feel the creative urge of the nation unit, you see. With vaster scientific progress and forces at his disposal. Those people hadn't got those means. Well, the nation unit now has got very powerful, effective, scientific discoveries at its disposal to bring about this participation of the individual in the whole. The city-states had three defects. One, they had slaves who had no rights. You see, patricians and the plebeians, even in Rome and in Greece also. The slaves had women had no vote and no right. They could not solve the problem of interrelation of states except by fight. They couldn't think, Sparta couldn't think of, dealing with Athens except on basis of war. Thebes, Sparta, Athens, each was a state, and each state's relation with the other was only on the basis of war. Couldn't imagine anything else. And thirdly, they became subject to, limits or limitations of narrow insularity. So you see, when this state is very small, it tends to become insular, and in its thinking also becomes narrow, and the channels become very small in the mind. So after the collapse of Roman Empire, the creation of nation aggregates was the work which nature seems to have taken up. After the Roman Empire, you see, the empires that preceded, as soon as somebody came to power, his first impulse was to conquer the world. And now, this conquering of the world, you can go back to those empires which are now in the past, you see, pre-nation unit empires, nation empires, empires that came into existence before the nations were organized. Sri Aurobindo says that if you study deeply, the effort was not to conquer the world but to unite mankind. The idea was to make it one world. But it took the form of an outer compulsion, you see, military conquest. Even imperialistic and colonial, effort was at bottom inspired by this unity of mankind. Either one man conquers or a nation tries to conquer. The idea was to bring the one world into a sense of unity. That was really the driving force. But those empires were destroyed because, even the nations had not been organized. How could humanity be organized when even you see, before the age of the nations coming into their own, bringing whole mankind into unity was not even possible. So Alexander or anybody who preceded him, Macedonian, before you go to the other empires that existed, well, they broke up in no time because there was no real unity there possible. The effort behind was to conquer not for one man, really speaking, but it was idea to put whole human race into one, organization. But before the groups come into effective existence, collectivities, societies, or nations, it was not possible to put the whole humanity together. That's why they broke up. And they had to give place to the evolution or organization of nation units. After the breakup of the Roman Empire, nature seems to have taken up the organization of nation units. The ancient city states and regional kingdoms, being cultural units in a geographical aggregate, had many points in common but also many divergences. And these divergences prevented them from becoming a nation. Why did not those city states that were so evolved merge into a nation state? Because they had the divergences also. In Egypt and in India, the attempt was made with partial success. But generally by welding together of small units into a nation seems to have come about by subjugation of all by one clan, one city, or one regional unit. You see, one clan or one city or one regional unit dominates others and presses them into one nationhood. It was pressure from outside, it was military force, and it was compressing the collectivities into unity. The first effort didn't come by a voluntary association of people. First came seems to have come about by one unit of the whole group dominating others, one clan dominating others, or one regional unit, even up to last when Germany united. Well, it was Prussia who put the whole pressure on the whole of Germany and brought it together, isn't it? The, the pressure of Prussia brought the latest instances of German unity. It was brought about by domination of Prussia over the other German states, you see, and unification was affected by Prussia dominating. The yes. In Rome, Macedon, and the mountain tribes in Prussia effected this task. Now, these new states of Asia, instead of consolidating the nation, went out for expansion and conquest under military impulse, and nation unit not being yet firmly rooted, self conscious, and irresistibly one. So, the pre nation empires like Assyria, Macedonia, and Rome could not endure. This he gives you the reading of why empires that were formed in pre-nation period were dissolved or collapsed. It is because they were too early, you see. To organize the unity of mankind was too early for them. That is why Assyria, Macedonia, Rome could not endure. Where was the error? The error was in not carrying out the objective of nature in evolving first the nation aggregate. If they had busied themselves organizing the nation unit, they might have succeeded. But they didn't get the inkling from nature. Sri Aurobindo says about it, the aggregates of mankind are organized, small or great, on the same basis as the creation of vital organism in physical nature. You observe the organization of vital organism in physical nature, well, the same process is applied to the organization of aggregate. The methods employed are primarily external and physical, but the object is to deliver, to manifest that which is supra-rational or supra-physical, a psychological principle which is latent in nature, behind the operation of life and body. So that what nature does is, in the organization of a life unit in physical nature, what it does is that it brings about the release of that which is behind the outer form, the psychological entity, or as he puts it here, the principle. Something supra-physical that wants to be released is released by nature. The vital ego is first organized. The first organization is vital or ego. In small aggregates, the psychological element is strong along with the vital and the physical. In those organizations, in those collectivities where you find there is a strength and a power, you will see that when it got organized, the vital force and the psychic force or the soul force of the race, both were strong. Two elements were equally strong, strong along vital and physical. And in larger aggregates of the nation, the psychological sense and the vital energy are there, but they are not yet organized in very large units. So, in the formation of larger nation unit, all these elements are to be organized. These large nation units would have to contain small groups, minor units within themselves. A large nation is not made up only of individuals. A large nation is made up of groups. Societies, religious societies, organized industrial societies, or labor societies, or societies which function as groups within the whole, is it not? The problem of large nation units is how to integrate the small units of which it is composed. Each one is not connected with the whole nation at once. Each one is connected with the whole through a group, a social group, religious group, industrial group, and so on. The, these large nation units would have to contain small groups, minor units within themselves. And the problem is, Sri Aurobindo says, how to the component parts shall be subordinated to the new unity without their death and without their disappearance. It is very difficult. Rome died because Rome sucked the whole life of the group, small groups of which she was the leader, you see. What Rome did was not to allow the small units to thrive and to grow, keeping the unity, always in view. Instead, what Rome did was that when her life was ebbing, she banked upon the life of these groups and deprived them of their vital currents and vital energy, with the result that when Rome had nothing else, they had nothing to supply to Rome. When Rome was in danger, there was nothing on which she could depend. These small units, a religious group, a social group, a political group, an industrial group, a labor group, if you keep it going and unite it in the nation, there is chance of the whole nation being revitalized or kept alive by the life of the group or life of the individual who is in the group. But if the group itself is deprived of its life or deprived of its existence, or as he says, the problem is how to integrate component parts should be subordinated in such a way to a new unity without their death and without disappearance. How to keep them alive and still keep the unity going. Well, if you keep them alive, probably the life of the nation becomes weak comparatively. In physical nature, he quotes, you see, he writes in his book, in physical nature, vital organisms cannot live entirely on themselves. If you see a tree, it does not live on itself, it has to live on many things outside. So does the animal. You see, so in physical nature, vital organisms cannot live entirely on themselves. They live either by interchange with other vital organisms or partly by their interchange and partly by devouring other organisms. Well, this is common to separated physical life. When physical life is independent, this is indispensable. You can't help it. The inunification of life, on the other hand, an assimilation is possible. When life is united, then you need not live by devouring, but not even by interchange, but an assimilation is possible. And the problem of larger nation unit today is of such an assimilation. How to make an assimilation possible where one group would not devour other group, you see, would not live on other group. How they have a common assimilation, you see, something common on which, the groups are living. He therefore suggests that there can be instead an association of units consciously subordinating themselves. If the nation unit wants to become vigorous, alive, and really successful as a nation unit and of one unit of collective and aggregate life, what they can do is that instead they can evolve an association of units consciously subordinate themselves to general unity, which is developed in the process of coming together. When groups came together, a unity was developed, and a conscious subordination of the group to the whole, well, would be is conceivable. That is why the war of the southern and northern states was there, you see, where the group thought that it had an independent life to live because of certain fundamental difference. And the unity that was brought about was to realize that in the largest interest of the whole, the differences were not so great. And the differences, if they were fundamental, had to be, well, adjusted on the basis of an ethical or a moral principle of equality of man, the birthright of man, freedom and liberty. You see, the forcing of the southern states was not domination of the north over the side, over the south. It was really speaking, driving to the mentality of the south the necessity of equality and democracy. I mean, equality of man, really, it was that. And on the basis of it was that the northern states had to fight and bring the southern states together. That if we remain together, all of us, it will be on this basis. And this establishment of this basis necessitates that the smaller group should subordinate consciously to the larger group. The defect of the Roman Empire was that it destroyed the cultural individuality of the units it governed, and so died of starvation for want of vital energy flowing to it in time of need. When she needed, the Roman had nobody to depend upon, but it was starved out. In the 12th chapter, we have the idea of nation building in Europe. That is the subject matter. How the nation building in Europe took place. This is a general growth of nation unit from smaller units to larger units, with the complicated difficulties of adjustment of smaller units within the larger units, and how nature goes on forming units on certain basis. When physical life is separated in a group, well, it necessitates interchange and devouring. And is it possible then to organize collective life in such a way as to make assimilation the common process of groups that live in one nation? If common groups are living in one nation, is it possible for them to live on, to bring into their life the principle of assimilation and not of interchange and mutual devouring? The cycle of nation building in Europe. This was a slow process in three stages of unity without killing the constituent elements. This is what European nationhood achieved in three steps or three stages. It was in the medieval ages that it began, the organization of national life. These stages are inevitable under complex modern conditions also. The three stages. Externally, circumstances and institution compelling some kind of sufficient order and common civilization must be there before a nation is formed. When can a nation be formed? Outwardly speaking, there must be circumstances and institutions which compel some kind of order and common civilization. If that is not there, it's difficult to form a nation. There must be prevailing values of cultural life already in existence, common accepted ideas of what is good, or some kind of common belief. You see, it is already there before the nation comes into being. Institutions and circumstances compelling some kind of order and common civilization must be there. Secondly, a stringent order directed by unity means establishment of central control. When that condition is there, second is establishment of a central control, a centralizing authority. And thirdly, free internal development. It must then be allowed freely to develop internally from within out. But these three stages are indispensable for formation of a living nation. The first stage tends to create a social hierarchy. Generally, when the first stage is there, institutions compelling sufficient order and common civilization, then there is generally division of functions. Based on division of function, there is a hierarchy. There may be, for instance, religious hierarchy, political or economic, or work or labor, like that. This process took place in Europe and in Asia at the same time under different names, but the principle was the same. A common cultural, external, institutional background, and a social order in which there was a kind of social hierarchy. The noble and the aristocrat and the knight and the samurai and the kshatriya and the brahmin and so on. That sort of, that is the beginning. And yet, it is curious to observe that Islam, based on equality, failed to evolve a nation unit. It is one of the most, religions which most insists on equality. In fact, has tried to carry it out to a very great extent in life. And yet, in spite of it, it has not succeeded in evolving a powerful nation unit. In the struggle, the church versus the state, the, the state won in Europe. And Sri Aurobindo says about it, it was a symbol of the law that self-conscious and politically organized nation can have only one supreme central authority, and it must be a secular authority. He generalizes on the what happened in Europe when the religious authority was put down. You see, it was a symbol of the law that self-conscious and politically organized nation can have only one supreme and central authority. It must be a secular state, secular power. This is proved by the working. My remarks about it. It is proved by the working of the theocratic states such as Pakistan in modern times. See, it has proved a retrograde step in the evolution of collective life in mankind today. That it could not function effectively under a democratic constitution, and that it was obliged to bring military dictatorship, well, to save itself from utter chaos, shows that a theocratic state in modern times is an anomaly. You can't have it. You see, it doesn't work. Pakistan also is a state that has come into being against the historical trend towards human unity. India was one, and one India could have joined the whole one humankind. Instead, it wanted divided India, you see, so that it was in one sense a retrograde state from the drive of unity of mankind. The second stage is directed towards, the second stage is that of, the stringent order or establishment of a central authority, is it not? Central control. That is the second element which comes into being when the nation develops. You see, the first is a order which is privilege order, and then a establishment of a central authority. Is directed towards unity, towards establishing a centrality of control, a leveling and uniformity under central direction. When this stage in the evolution of the nation comes and becomes effective, the hierarchy created by the first step becomes loose, has to loosen its grip and dissolve itself. That is what happens, you see, all over, wherever the central authority became very strong, aristocratic class or the religious class that were privileged had to become weak or comparatively less important. In India, British domination did this work. This stage takes away the freedom of the individual, certainly, but it establishes central control, one law and one authority. It takes away individual liberty in the second stage of nation development. It takes away liberty, but individual freedom, but establishes one authority in one law. Well, the Code Napoleonic, for the matter of that, is the first code that came into existence in Europe. Do you know that? Before that, the citizens were not equal before law. And it was imposed. It was not voted by the people. You understand? Point is centralization. We are only seeing at the point where the nation unit organizes central authority. And he shows the contradictory appearance that sometimes monarchs have contributed to the centralizing of the nation unit. Even monarchy has contributed to the bringing together of the nation together. It has happened. It looks contradictory that nation that wants and swears by freedom and democracy should have a very important contribution made to its existence or its growth by absolute authority of the king sometimes. Well, here, in the, yes, it established central control. In this connection, the historical role of monarchy has to be judged quite different from current view. This is a very fine argument he has put in this chapter 12, you see. It has to be seen as a powerful factor in bringing the whole nation unit into existence. For example, he says, Ivan, Peter, and Catherine in Russia. Even the, yes, Tudors and Plantagenets in England, the Capets in France and Hohenzollerns in Germany, Mikado in Japan. You study the role, then you will see that the centralizing of the nation unit was affected by this authority, which is arbitrary, monarchical, and seems absolute in its working. All these contributed to the attainment of maturity to the respective nations. The severity seen during this stage was inevitable stage in the formation of the nation unit by political and mechanical means. Well, politically you have to bring, mechanically you have to bring, then force and exertion of force was indispensable. It was not a natural wickedness of the rulers that you have to see. Monarchical authority concentrated in its activity the whole national life. That is why I think Queen Elizabeth could say that the attack of the Spanish Armada was attack on England, and all England could feel that it was so. It was not only authority of Elizabeth that was at stake, but the nation, how the nation was made to feel the unity, you see, under the central authority. And this establishing of order and central power was indispensable necessity in the growth of the nation unit. The end of the 18th years, the second stage was bound therefore to topple. This could not have lasted very long. The king's authority, you see, the undisputed arbitrary power of a central authority could not last. It was bound to topple over. The bourgeoisie led the revolt. The common man, you see, because he had the talent. He was irritated by the inferiority to which he was subjected. And then thinkers had awakened into the nation. Thinkers whose ideas also got people convinced of the truth of their ideas, and they took the masses with them. So the central authority had to topple over by the revolt of the bourgeoisie, the thinker, and the spread of ideas among the masses, an organization of masses for freedom. The large nation unit came thus into existence. At the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th century, the ideal of democratic nation came to the front in France. It caught the mind of all the people, but even in Europe it didn't work out, as I told you before, immediately. I think Central Europe and Russia were imperialistic and Germany was monarchical. But still, the idea had triumphed not only in Europe but in America and even in Asia, where Turkey, Persia, India, China caught the flame of the democratic inspiration, and France gave the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity to political life of mankind. It was Germany who gave the first organized state to Europe, and thus, lending shape unconsciously to socialistic idea. She was not conscious of socialism, but without knowing and unconsciously, she brought the socialist idea into existence. It was the perfectly organized state that gave Germany the tremendous success she got initially in the First World War. And even though Germany was defeated, Sri Aurobindo says that the idea for which she stood, a perfectly organized state, had won, and other states in Europe followed the state idea. It is this which now figures in some of the nations as democratic socialism. That is, just now it has given the name of democratic socialism. Then I quote from his writing, the nation unit is not formed and does not exist merely for the sake of existing. The race is there in labor of formation of a still larger unit. a greater mold of collective life. The nation unit may stand, and there is likelihood that it may stand in the way of formation of this larger unit, which must evolve out of this nation unit, to which collective life of man has come as the most effective, mold for its expression. But liberty has become the watchword of the race. Religion once suppressed liberty and had to go. He says there is a saving, situation, that liberty is there as an established watchword of all the people, individual as well as nations. The individual wants liberty, nations want liberty. So, liberty has become the watchword of the whole race. Religion once suppressed liberty and had to abdicate. Kings trampled upon liberty under their feet, they had to go. Capitalism tried to put down liberty, it is threatened. Is it not? Yes. With liberty, man gets his dignity and freedom of manhood. So that is the first step we have. The real strength of this tendency of liberty, individual and collective, you see, the real strength is in its intellectual, idealistic, and emotional parts, not in its political and military and economic strength. Mark that. You follow? The real strength of this idea, tendency towards liberty, is not in its military, economic, and administrative side, but as he says here, intellectual, idealistic, and emotional parts. That is its real strength. Its economic causes are partly permanent and therefore elements of strength and secure fulfillment, partly artificial and temporary. Whatever economic, drive or tendencies there is only, and therefore elements of insecurity and weakness. The political incentives are the baser parts of the whole amalgam. When one thinks of liberty in terms of only politics, political incentive, well, that brings in the very low element of human nature into existence. It is idealistic, intellectual, and emotional parts that are really the strength of this tendency. Their presence may even vitiate the whole result, presence of economic and political motives, you see, and lead in the end to a necessary dissolution and reversal of whatever unity may be initially accomplished. Whatever unity man can accomplish is merely drive of economic and political incentives will push it back, will make it retrograde. With liberty, justice is necessary. Because if you give man complete liberty, well, he will just do what he shouldn't do to others, you see. And therefore, justice is necessary. And therefore, equality. Not absolute equality, for it is impossible, but equal opportunity in life, in training, and share in the state. This is the proclaimed goal of secular democratic socialism. I quote from his writing now. The new supranational or supranational order must be a free association of international life constituted by free nations, and it must lead peacefully and by natural unfolding of the spiritual and ethical progress of the race to such a secure, just, and healthy political, social, and economic foundation as might enable mankind to turn from its preoccupation with these lower cares and begin at last that development of its higher self, which is the nobler part of its potential destiny. Or if not that, for who knows whether nature's long experiment in human type is foredoomed to success or failure? At least the loftiest possibility of our future with the human mind can envisage unity of mankind, you see. Perhaps liberty and equality, liberty and authority, liberty and organized efficiency can never be quite satisfactorily reconciled. Liberty and equality. Because if you give perfect liberty due to put down equality. If you give equality, you have to restrict liberty. Liberty and authority. Liberty and organized efficiency can never be quite satisfactorily reconciled so long as man, individual and aggregate, lives by egoism. Liberty and organized efficiency can never be quite satisfactorily reconciled so long as man, individual and aggregate, lives by egoism. So long as he cannot undergo a greater spiritual and psychological change and rise beyond mere communal association to that third ideal which some vague inner sense made the revolutionary thinkers of France add to their watchwords of liberty and equality. They didn't know why they were adding. You see, probably liberty and equality was quite enough. Some vague inner sense made the revolutionary thinkers of France add to their watchwords of liberty and equality, the greatest of all the three, though till now only an empty word on man's lips, the ideal of fraternity, or less sentimentally and more truly expressed, an inner oneness. It's not only fraternity, but an inner oneness. That no mechanism, social, political, or religious, has ever created or can create. It must take birth in the soul of the individual, you see, and rise from the hidden and divine depths from within. Well, that gives you the end of chapter 12, I think. And you can go a little further, perhaps one more chapter you can take. No? We are going to chapter 14. Yes. Well, that gives you some idea of political philosophy. What is political philosophy in the light of life divine, is it not? Well, you get a full dose of it. We might take up, no? I think so. What do you say? If you think it is enough, I don't know. I'm ready for the next one chapter anyway. Huh? Well, we take one chapter, 14th at any rate. Possibility of the first step towards international unity. That's the chapter, you see. And what are the difficulties? That is 14th chapter of this ideal of human unity. Well, he says that same course that nation's evolution had to follow, and the same difficulty which nation unit had to undergo in coming to life and becoming effective, might be also met by this international unity of mankind, you see. The same, we have seen some course of the difficulties to which nation unit passes in the beginning. It has to have a centralized authority which becomes very dictatorial and puts a central control. That's one kind of thing. And then the authority is tempered over, and then you find the liberty as the watchword coming in and putting the nation unit in effective, organizing group life into it in such a way as to keep the group living, and yet living within the unity of the whole. Well, the same difficulties will arise to the unity of mankind, allowing the nation unit to remain living and thriving under its unity. The same obstacle. Then how to get a central authority? That will be the problem, isn't it? So it says nation units difficulties might be repeated in the organization of this international whole, the unity of mankind. Well, because here we have got loose masses of mankind, vague forces are acting, material also is all over scattered, so to say. It's not in an organized form as to at once form human unity. Secondly, democratic socialism all over the world in nations has come to the front. The politician also is working, and he is an obstacle. The politician in every race, every nation, he is also he is an obstacle, because he is working on average mentality, average intelligence, And that means to say he is ruled by interest, and even with passion and prejudice. He is also not ruled by thought, is he not? He is not ruled by idealism or thinking, he is in the interest. And he is afraid to change, to bring anything new, because he wants to be elected next time. You see, that's the whole. So he's afraid of any change. He tries to continue status quo in everything. Fourth factor is that the old order or old values have completely collapsed. There was a time when, in Victorian time, you could have a settled order for 50 years. I mean, what is right, what is good, what must be, what must not be, what is proper and what is improper was definite, absolutely fixed. Even the way in which you must move in a group life, and the order in which a dinner should be arranged was fixed, and who must speak and how you must speak, and who will. Well, it was terrific order, but it was order anyway. All the values are gone and finished, broken to pieces. And it was perhaps good. It is necessary because that self complacence, as if one had reached the peak of culture and was only one work was to do, the burden of culture to pass this wonderful culture to other people who are less fortunate than themselves. It was such a self complacence that it took our breath away when we were fighting for freedom. We have seen that Victorian age, we know what it is, you see. And it simply, I couldn't imagine human being thinking they were perfect, first of all. The first difficulty was to believe that anybody in the world could think, and they did, I tell you, they did. They thought, we are now nothing. Heaven is we represent heaven. And they always used to laugh at Indian seriously thinking, that is what MacDonald, the Prime Minister of India, when he was not the Prime Minister and a Labour member, visited India in 1906. Ramsay MacDonald, you see? And his first reaction when he came to contact with the spirit of India, means real Indians, was the staggeringly smallness of his own cultural size. He says, we feel before India, means European culture. You see, he representing English culture. We feel before India like a decent-minded prize fighter before a saint. And that was true. He is a good, decent mind, very honest fighter. He is a prize fighter. He is coming it. Here he found the Indians asking for freedom, and they said, but you have no army, you have no unity, you have no organization, you have no political idea. And no Indian believed it. He was staggered at that. He was a politician, boiled politician, you see. He had done politics all his life, and he came, he was sympathetic to India. He was not anti-Indian at all. He wanted that India should be free. But he said, what will you do? Indians didn't listen. They said, there is Mother India. She must become free. He said, these are fanatic people. He actually felt that. Men of 70, men of 60, men of 75, not young, hot-headed revolutionaries. No, old people, grown in culture, had read world's literature. When he talked with them in Calcutta on dinner, they said, no, you don't know, Mother India is free and Mother India must be free. Oh, we cannot have the mother in bondage any longer. He said, what is this logic and what is this politics? Where is your party? Where are your funds? Where is your army? Where is your resistance? No thought. He was staggered. He couldn't believe. Well, that's that. That's India. That's one side. Well, we were talking about the place of something inner in this scheme of things. The moral collapse of the whole order, you see. Therefore, some order has now got to emerge, he says. That order was terrific, idea. We have seen that order. It was steel frame. ICS was called the steel frame that was governing India. He never mixed with anyone because he was superior. He was great. And Indians laughed at him. He's a young man, they used to say. Oh, he has no experience. Oh, he doesn't know what is life. Indians talk among themselves with ISIS collector thinking, going on great governor. Oh, oh, these people don't know anything. Well, the people think he doesn't know anything, they said. He's quite inexperienced. Oh, he has got power now, so he thinks power one can't remain with. You see, power can't remain with one man forever. Power has to go. And they banked on this sort of thing, and this collector never knew what they were thinking about. It was ridiculous. I have seen a fisherman passing a remark about European culture, just so deep. You see, they were talking in their language. The foreign couple, I don't know who it was, they didn't know their language. And he said, oh, he's holding her by the hand. He's afraid she'll run away. Why? Why is holding her by the hand? He's telling. It is not a judgment on culture, but it's a way of looking at things so different culturally. You see, for the European, it's natural and quite spontaneous, and I think very good. The expression of mutual relationship. But to an West Eastern mind, it looks as if why so much insistence on anything external for the matter of that. You understand? It's not that it is not good; it is good, but there's a way of looking at it, and they feel why so much insistence on external. If it is unity, it is unity, isn't it? If it is relation, it is relation, whether expressed or not expressed in the outer. I mean. Well, the way of looking. It's not that this is right or that is wrong. No, it's a difference, and the difference has a basis. That's all. Not that one is good or another is bad. Nothing of the kind. I think both are good. Both are good because both express some reality, some truth. Both are expression of a truth. You see, that is what I wrote in one of my reminiscences on my visit to England. You see, I was guest of Professor Cyril Bailey. You see, he is 84 now. Correct? Now I don't know whether he's alive because he was 84 in 55 when I went to England. And I was his guest one day. And he and Mrs. Bailey, you see, were looking after me and so on. So I said, I must be looking after you. You're old, 85, you see. And very nice man, very cultured. The way in which he was living, an English family, you see. Now I could put my mind to India and see how a couple of 85, one 85 and another, she was about 60, I think, or 62 or 65. How they behaved and how a couple in India would have behaved. Well, it brought to my mind the contrast of the way in which an equally cultured, social life is conceivable on two different lines altogether. It was very fine experience, I think. It was. I had a friend in India like that, was old, quite old, 84, 82, and his wife was alive, 67 or so. And the way they lived and the way in which Dr. Cyril Bailey and his wife lived was to me a study. Like quite a, well, how the same truth expresses itself, or same reality, or same relation, finds expression in two different modes, you see, of culture. And well, one may say that temperamentally he likes one or like the other. That is only a temperamental expression, but fundamentally the thing I think is the same. It is the same reality that finds expression. Some kind of international system has become inevitable because of the collapse of the old values, you see. After the Second War, it has become terrific. The collapse has become a confusion, you see. And that is what I think C.D. Lewis, Herbert Reed, and some of the top, intellectuals in England have noticed. You see, what is it? I think it was. Yes, C.D. Lewis has said that European culture is not not one current in which one can flow, but it's a cross current of many currents flowing together, and one has to find his way in that. It is, you see, it's a current full of many cross currents inside. And that is true because old values have gone and finished, and new ones have not come, and then certain things are trying to catch hold, and certain reactions are there, certain hopes are there, ideals are there, and it is a turmoil. Really speaking, it's a cauldron. That is why a new, inevitability of something international system arising or emerging is necessary. The questions are, for instance, how to eliminate war, limitation of armaments, settlement of disputes without fighting, or organization of commercial and aims and interest on a base of peace. Well, these are the problems that are there. Once begun, he says, it will be impossible for mankind to draw back. I'm quoting his sentence that this international order has to come. It has become a necessity. Once begun, it will be impossible for mankind to draw back. And 40 years back he wrote, remember. And whatever difficulties, disappointments, struggles and reactions, checks and brutal interruptions might mark the course of this development, they would be bound to help in the inevitable result. It must come into being. The result is evolution of an international order. It must come. In spite of difficulties, disappointments, struggle, reactions, checks, brutal interruptions, they will be only marking the progress, but it has got to come. War can be abolished only if national armaments are abolished. That's quotation. The awakening must go deeper and lay hold upon much purer roots of action before the psychology of nations will be transmuted into that something wondrous, rich and strange, which will eliminate war from human life. If war is to be eliminated, well, this is the condition. The awakening must go much deeper. You see, and lay hold upon much purer roots of action before the psychology of the nations will be transmuted into that something wondrous, rich and strange, which will eliminate war from human life. Wherever egoism is, I'm quoting it, the root, egoism is the root of action, it must bear its own proper results and reactions. And however minimized and kept down they may be by an external machinery, their eventual outburst is sure and can only be delayed but not prevented forever. So if the nations behave on the basis or act on the basis of egoism, it will only be rebound on them by a reaction. We cannot avoid the reaction. So that the necessity is to go to a deeper root of feeling and action. The stumbling block in the new creation would be possibly national egoism. That is one. And that's why I quoted the passage of egoism. Because limitation of armaments, when they are thinking of it, is only illusory remedy. It only lightens the burden in peacetime. It doesn't do anything more. And this international authority will have to come into being if it is to be effective. And if international authority is there, something like an international state or an international organization with sufficient force must be brought into being. Chapter 14.
One great help towards unity be the understanding of differences and the allowing of differences.
Yes. It is understanding really on this basis that without variation, there can be no real unity. You see? Unity is expression of oneness based on variation, based on multiplicity, based on variation. And the variation is necessary. That is why a drive towards unity must not become a drive towards uniformity.
With the current youth and the stress and strain toward, quote, peace movements, world peace, and so on, and Aurobindo's expression that this cannot come about except at the
inner level, yes.
inner level. Yet, the inner development of man is something about which man does nothing to a degree because this is already working out. So what sort of an impasse do we come to? How do we satisfy the mind of these kids that are saying we must have peace, we must do something about it? And yet, if you teach them the inner, is this violating their normal rhythms? Am I making myself clear?
Yes. No,
What's the
they
rhythm of
well,
man?
if they take to peace as an ideal,
They are.
not as a vital counterpart against anything. There can be two ways of making a movement for peace.
Yeah. Well, they're both. They're.
Yes,
They're not,
the one is simply a vital revolt against whatever somebody is doing, either government or an organization or somebody. Well, that is really undesirable because that will not bring the real thing. But if it is an idealistic movement, then behind it is a psychic being already working.
But
If it is goaded by an idealism, an ethical idealism or intellectual idealism, by an ideal of liberty, equality, or fraternity, or oneness of mankind, or equality of mankind, you see, if that is really the living driving force, then it is something which has already got a psychic element in it. It might lead ultimately to the awakening of the inner soul. So that is a movement which can be fostered. The one that rises up as something against, a measure or against a policy or against something being done by somebody, well, in that case, that is only a vital reaction and it won't have any root. It won't have any reality behind it. It will be on the surface and it will die out. It won't realize even what it wants to realize. It won't. Because it really seriously doesn't want to realize. It's only a reaction against something. It has no deeper root in the being, you see.
you can see those two movements very easily in the way they react.
When I think of these two, the lectures in the morning or the talks in the morning and talks at night, and I think over them just before I go to sleep, I see such a great similarity in their purpose and their meaning. It's overcoming the ego.
Yes. You see, Sri Aurobindo's vision is cosmic. And there is no field of life which is outside his scheme of human perfection. Therefore, there is no problem on which he has no light to give. He has guidance for every problem of life. That is the sign of a rishi in India. You see, sign of a rishi is that he gives you the dharma of the age, some idea of how to prepare yourself for the truth that is coming. In whatever field of life you may happen to be. You may be in any field of life, but a rishi, when he comes, he sees a vision of the truth. And the vision of a truth is not unrelated to life. A rishi is not a sannyasi, he is not a renounced man. A rishi is a man of vision. And what he sees is a dynamic truth which is coming to mankind. And he sees it in advance of his age. He sees it 1,000, 2,500 years before anybody else sees. And then he gives to the people living, collectivities, nations, and individuals the norm of life, the rule of life, or the way of life by which they can prepare themselves for the truth that is coming. He knows that the truth is going to come. Well, the best way for man is to prepare for it. And he gives the humanity the way to prepare for the coming of a greater truth, which is already on the way, which is already throwing its rays on the present. You see, it is throwing its rays and pulling, the present towards it. Well, the best way that man can do is to prepare for it. And the rishi comes before anybody else has seen the truth. If he is a great rishi, he sees the whole truth and not a part of it. And when he sees the whole truth, he sees the whole field of life and can full the illumination of it, the light of it, he can throw on all the fields of life and show how in each field that light is going to work and how to prepare in each field to receive the light. He gives what India calls the dharma of the dharma means the norm of life, the rule of life by which you can prepare yourself to receive the truth. Therefore, for the politician, for the nation builder, for the economists, for the educationists, for everybody, there is light of Sri Aurobindo available if he wants to take it. That is why we travel thousands of miles to come and see if somebody wants to see. It's not that it's nothing new to us, and it's nothing that we are disappointed. If nobody listens, it doesn't matter. Truth is there all the time. There is no disappointment at all, because truth is truth and it is going to work. It is going to work. It is man's choice to profit by it or to be forced into it or to oppose it. It depends on man. It is man's this business.
May I ask one more question?
Yes.
You just said man must prepare.
Yeah, that's why we take trouble to see it. You see,
And I want to finish the question. Man must prepare, yet man must surrender, which means no prepare. In other words, this is
no, he can't surrender unless he prepares.
that's the point. The preparation is the preceding stage.
Yes.
You can only surrender after you have completed it.
Yes, when you understood what surrender is for and to whom
Yeah.
and why.
Yeah, it's encouraging to know that the truth is coming or is already.
Yes, but that wouldn't profit any if we don't. Either allow it or get hold of us. Otherwise, it may be there and it may be passing over our head.
Yes, but you said it was coming, yes. It
Yes.
already is, and you don't care, I mean, it's here.
Yes, it is. It is right here.
But we have to receive it.
Most literally, it is here. In the most literal sense of the term. That's why we meditate here. Because it is here, we want to bring it down in us. Open ourselves to it and ask it to get in, as far as we can allow it to.
But this is necessary, isn't it? This is essential that we do this, that we open to this.
Yes, only we don't want to do it in an external way, what people call propaganda and agitation and restless and unless and until. Nothing of the kind. You be sure of the truth first. Be sure of the truth. And then be loyal to it and be surrendered to it oneself. Rest will follow. There's no hurry. Rest has to follow. With difficulties, resistance, obstacles, they are part of the game, is it not? So you can't simply say, oh, why? Why? No, because things are like that. There's no why.
There's a movement in the Episcopalian churches now, I understand, where they are what they call speaking in tongues. Do you know anything about that? Does anybody know anything about it? Apparently you sit and then all of a sudden you speak. I don't know. I've never been to one of the meetings, but
English Episcopal Church
yes, it
in
is.
England.
No, in the
Oh, here.
and there's one in the Marin that I heard about, which is the high church, not the low church. And they have their meetings, their healing meetings, and then they have their other meetings in which I understand that the preacher, whoever he is, the others put their hand on his shoulder and just transfer the power. And then somebody breaks out and starts speaking in tongues. Now, what is this? I mean, I don't know. This seems so strange. They come from the Episcopal.
Sounds like gobbledygook.
Well, it's.
No, it is. It
When
is
you
a.
mentioned about this vital running from here to there, and this is what about.
No, it is a sign that men are wanting to have something more than externally what is available or what they can have, either ideas, thoughts, or organizations. They want to have some direct contact with something more than visible world, and they have the contact. That's all right. Only the question is which invisible world you contact. That's all, because there is a plenty of hierarchy, and in the hurry to get or in a ignorant mood or egoistic searching with ambition and with something that I must prove myself and so on, you might just contact something halfway intermediate zone, and those powers may not be the powers that are representative of the truth. They might be the powers that are really not of the truth, you see. There are occult powers, and all occult is not truth, you see. Occult is very often a mixture of truth and falsehood.
But is this what you call
Truth and
occult?
falsehood. They are generally, the occult is full of vital forces which are full of ambition, and they catch hold of human being with ambition to fulfill themselves rather than bring any truth which is superior to them. You see, that is a tragedy of man seeking, because when he is not sincere in his seeking for the truth, he asks immediately for some power. And the vital world is full of forces that always promise you fulfillment of power. You see?
Well, I'm not a student of the Bible, but there's something rather when Christ, or the Master Jesus was talking to his disciples, and there's something in there where they spoke in tongues, and whether these people are trying to recapture that, and whether it's just, you say, a desire for power.
Yes. What they should really do is to renovate or create or live themselves in the Christ consciousness, if they are seriously Christian. I mean, if they really want to believe in Christianity and Christ, the best they can do is to live the Christ consciousness in themselves. That means that awaken the divine consciousness, because that is Christ consciousness. That would be real.
Yeah.
And probably they might find that leads them to this vision. Immediately they are in that consciousness, they might feel the whole totality of the vision which was given. That is very likely to happen.
But they say they're in the Christ consciousness when they're not. This is what
That's a
Hmm?
distortion.
that's a distortion. They say they're in the Christ consciousness. They say the Holy Spirit descends and they're in the Christ consciousness.
That any vital force will say like that. Any vital force will say like that. When it wants to catch hold of the human being or communicate its own working to the human being, it will always say what the human being would like him to say. If the human being likes that Christ should be there, it will say, I'm Christ. That's all. It doesn't mean that it is Christ. It is like the other man on the telephone end. Yes, and he says, are you so and so? Yes, of course I am. That's all. But he may be just trying to, because he knows that you want that it should be he. So he says, yes, I am that.
And Shiva, are these occult impressions, are they ever accompanied by light?
Very rarely. They have their own light. They have the light. But if you have connection with the true light, then you know the relativity of the light. But hardly they are not accompanied, but they have their own light, which is not of the same type or the same color or intensity as the true light or the divine light, you see.
Person, of course, who's never had anything to do with the occult and doesn't want anything to do with it, wouldn't know. I mean, they wouldn't know. I wouldn't know.
Well, it won't come to you, perhaps. Why are you afraid?
That's great.
It wouldn't come to you unless you are prepared in some way. And it would come only to the extent or to the opening that you give. So if you give opening to the higher light, then only higher light will come. The other light have no chance of entering. No light can enter the human being, or no being can enter the human being unless an opening is given. And our opening may be through ignorance. You can give opening to anything, you see, because you are full of desire or full of ego or full of ambition. Well, you want, and then immediately anything rushes. Yes, that's all. But if you are full of devotion, full of surrender and aspiration for truth, then only that light will enter. The others have no entry. Human being is a protected fort. It's a fortress that is protected, even by ignorance. The ignorance itself protects it. No other being, yes. Because other being would not come and impinge easily and break through. If he was open to all the forces, man would be, shattered to pieces, I think, no doubt. So many tremendous powers are around him, but he's all right. In his shell, he's all right. And only thing that can come through is through his opening.
Yes, so these subtle forces or interest in subtle forces
one sign that we are on the threshold of a farther.
Yes, yes, there is a sign that,
Both good and bad.
yes, that the matter is not the only end of existence, that there are, subtle entities that are at work, and still greater heights are possible. It's a stirring of the inner worlds. It is that which brought the World War, Second World War. The stirring of the whole vital world on a large scale, because the light was coming.
Could it also be that these organized churches are losing their hold on people and they're going for sensation seeking or anything to?
Perhaps. Yes, instead of taking the longer path, difficult path of realizing Christ consciousness, it's a shortcut in one sense.
But there isn't any shortcut that way.
I don't
No.
think. It won't last very long.
But this is a pretty vicious thing if that is with intent to hold their power of the organization.
No.
I somehow kind of doubt it it sounded as if this particular person.
No, it's the whole, there's a magazine that's a dollar and a half an issue, there's a whole movement. And, there's a monk, a Catholic monk, that's from down Santa Barbara, and he went to one of these meetings, and he had these experiences, and, I don't know, my aunt brought one of them.
Well, there is one man, I forget his name now, he is having huge meetings and addressing them and so on. James somebody, what is the, he's young, quite young. Huh?
Billy Graham?
Yes.
Well, evangelism.
Well, that's different entirely. What about him?
What?
No, I said there are so many forces like that going out, the whole cosmic movement is working, you see, and so all things will work in a cauldron like that. What one has to do is to catch the thread and get along working, that's all. You can't take cognizance of all that, their own rationale about it and let it work out its own way, because the universal will have its own pressure and will work some common result out. It's a big cauldron.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of forces that you're going to call overmental being? I think Mother wrote that the vital gods are very, very bright and they have a lot of light and so on, and that the overmental gods are so much higher, and then yet the supramental are much higher than that. Do you get influences on the spiritual path from these overmental beings?
Well, overmental is really speaking the truth consciousness or the cosmic consciousness is not subjected to ignorance.
They're
Not subjected to ignorance, that is overmind. Overmind is cosmic consciousness englobing the whole lower triplicity of mind, life, and matter, covering it like big wings, as we read the other day, covering like a wing. But it is before the jump of the cosmic consciousness into ignorance and knowledge, both combined now. Cosmic consciousness is a mixture of two. Overmind is in the knowledge, in the truth, but yet is the first step down from the infinity and eternity of the truth consciousness, so that its relation with the truth consciousness is organic and direct. But it allows each possibility, each divine power, each divine force to try to realize itself, so that it releases, as he says in Life Divine, million gods into operation, each empowered or inspired to create a world of his own. That is why you find different idealisms here current in the world, you see. But that is our mental working. They are our mental gods, you see.
Aren't they ignorant in comparison to
No,
supramental beings?
no, not ignorant. So they are conscious of their force being derived from the supramental or truth conscious. There is always some truth in that sort of movement, you will see. You take communism, there is some truth behind it. It is not a movement of falsehood. Completely nothing at the bottom. It is some truth is behind it. Well, it is a truth that has to be found and not the outer form or constitution or the party form which it takes, you see. The idealism has behind it some force of reality, and that reality is to be embodied here, and not the outer aspect of it, political or social or economic. That is secondary. The real thing that inspires is something spiritual. So is democracy. Then it's something, it's not merely a constitution or, like either America or any other country and so on. That is not democracy. Democracy is the deepest spiritual truth of the soul. The freedom of the individual before the divine. That's all. The individual is absolutely free. That translates itself and throws itself in the constitution. And that becomes an idealism, so to say. But idealism means it is embodiment of a spiritual truth. It's not an idea. All ideas derive their justification from a reality. There is no mere idea. People don't know. Idea can arm itself into an army.
What was that? That makes sense.
Idea can be armed as an army. Idea is not something hanging in the clouds, you see. Not every time, but there are times when idea is armed. And you can see an army is not merely an army, but it's an idea that has got arms. And it is the idea that is winning. Not this man or that man or that. That happens very often. Only critical times, yes.
Purani, if there are veils between us and the truth consciousness, which by faith and aspiration, we wait, we don't tell the truth consciousness now, see here, I want this veil removed and I want to see this light.
Yes.
Because we would cause a great deal of havoc and disruption to our organisms. But if we wait patiently, are there veils of darkness, and not veils of darkness so much as veils put between the universal consciousness in its steps towards universal realization of truth consciousness in a universal concept? Do these veils have to be removed gradually by an outpouring of truth consciousness upon universal consciousness?
No, the truth consciousness is already pouring in the universal consciousness. The difficulty is the individual is not opening.
Well, and that is it so much for universal consciousness.
Yes, this is the truth consciousness already operating, pouring, or you can say flowing upon the universal consciousness already. That is why in the universal consciousness you find so much unrest. Now, unrest can take thousands of forms, and one may think this is reason, that is reason, but really speaking, it is the pressure or the flow of the truth consciousness or the light which is moving the cosmic movements. But cosmic movements cannot make them be self-effective unless the group life creates an atmosphere. You see, the cosmic movement is not capable of receiving the whole flow of the truth in the right way, because the collective mind, collective consciousness, collective being of man is egocentric, is full of desire, full of ambition, full of interest, full of selfishness, economic, this, that. It has no capacity to percolate straight into the collective. So what the flow of the truth consciousness is doing is to find the individual. You see, to find the individual and try to see if the individual wants the truth. If the aspiration in the individual is there, well, then certainly the higher life and truth consciousness can flow into him.